What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. Of course, this is TWA Motorsports, and today we are going to start the teardown of the 5.3. You guys saw in the last video, we got the truck cleaned on the bottom side. We got a majority of the engine cleaned. Now, I did off camera go along and do just the bottom of the block a little bit, so it is way cleaner. And so today, we're going to start the process of tearing everything out that I don't want and putting in the new stuff that I do. So new cam, new front timing cover, new oil pan gasket, new springs, because the new cam that we're gonna run will not require, I'm hoping there's dual springs. Guys, I don't know. From the looks of the rest of this truck and all the zip ties, who knows? Maybe they were running that ginormous cam with single springs. I'm hoping not, but either way, I think we're gonna start. You can see I've got my engine stand tied up over there with the Trans Am engine. So what I'm gonna be doing is really using my cherry picker here and just working on it right here. So I think what we're gonna start with is we're gonna have to swap out the springs. It's already setting here. I've got access all the way around it. So what we'll do is we'll start with the springs, get that in place, and then we'll move on to like the oil pan, the cam, and whatnot. So let's get started. I'm gonna set you guys up on a tripod and we'll talk about the process as we go through. I'm gonna try to show you guys as much as possible as I go. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take these valve covers off, and this is an 8mm. Once we get those loose, I've got a piece of cardboard over there I'm going to set all this stuff on, and it seriously has a set of single springs on it. Oh my gosh. Yeah, they're singles. Okay, well, that's interesting. So what that means is I'm probably not going to change them, to be real honest with you. I noticed in the truck there's a set of, or there's a pack springs sticker, and these do look like pack springs, but as far as singles go, I think we're going to be good here. I don't think we'll have any issues. So there's no sense in pulling stuff apart if you don't have to, guys. And I was going to just replace this with a set of LS3 springs that I have. And to me, there's no sense in doing that, because Pack is a good brand. But if they were dual springs, I really didn't need that in there. So I was going to take them out. But this is a little bit alarming, because that is a monster cam. The lift is way bigger than what a set of single springs should be doing. So yeah, anyway, we are gonna have to pull the cam. So in order to pull the cam, we do have to get the rockers loose. And so I'm gonna go ahead and do that as well. Now, they are also 8s. Now, sometimes they're pretty snug. That's what I thought. So this isn't gonna take them off. I'm gonna go grab my other impact and use it, because they are generally pretty tight. Well, I changed my mind, because I don't have an 8 that'll fit a 3/8 drive, and so I'm just going to crack these loose by hand. Otherwise, you could potentially break. I've got two reducers on here. Once we get them loose, they should come apart with the impact the rest of the way. Just sometimes they're sticky. I guess I am kind of excited that I don't have to worry about changing the springs out. Although I did want to show you guys my tool for taking these off, or taking the springs off, but maybe in another video we'll do that. So once you get them all loose, I like to just lift them by the stands. There's a rocker stand underneath it. And to be honest with you guys, they really need to stay with the rocker stand, because over time they do wear a pattern in them. So we're going to take these off and set them over there with the valve cover. Now, I may end up putting the valve cover on if I go in for the evening, just to keep dust and debris out of here. But for now, let's get these out of the way. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these push rods out. Now I was looking to see if they were original. I'll probably clean them up a little bit. They just got some carbon buildup on them. But they do look to be original, which is fine. There was no issues with the way this truck ran, so we don't have to worry about them being bent, but we're going to set those aside as well. So actually, since, you know, we're not going to need in here, I'm going to go ahead and put these on. Just snug. Because there's no sense in leaving the motor open. We'll come back to that and take that off. I just don't want anything, because this is going to be over a few days that I'll be doing this. I don't want anything to fall in there. So let's go to the other side and get it apart. Oh, looks like a stick. Interesting. Okay. This may have been done outside. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I know it's kind of hillbilly working on this on a tire, but sitting in this red chair and doing this is way easier than standing up. This actually isn't too bad. I like that it's somewhat clean in here. Makes me feel a little bit better about this engine. I spent all this time cleaning this up here. I wanted to make sure that there's a little bit of sludge on the back of those. I might clean those off at some point. So now that we got this part done, and that back covered up, I guess let's move to the front. On the front of these, you should have a series of 10 millimeters. And so I went and got my 10, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then there's 2 that come in from the bottom, 9 and 10. So I'm gonna start with the bottom ones. I guess it'd help if I went the right way. It's throwing stuff everywhere, guys. So we're gonna go through and get all these out. And I don't know if my new front timing cover came with bolts. I'm probably gonna look at that before I spend 20 minutes cleaning these old ones. See if we can get this cover off. Came off pretty easy because it didn't have anything sealing. You should have some sealant right here in the bottom. Holy cow. It smells hot, like. That's interesting. I can't tell. It said it had a high volume pump in it, and there's definitely some buildup here of like a little bit of neglect. But the cool thing about this is we do not have to pull the timing chain off. It does have an aftermarket pump in it. It has an aftermarket chain. The chain seems to have the amount of slop that a normal one would have. These LS chains, especially in the older versions where they don't have a tensioner down here, holy cow, did they have a ton of slop. But I think we're gonna, all we're gonna do, normally you would take the oil pump off, which would mean you drop the pan, which we're gonna drop the pan anyway, but normally you take the oil pump off in order to get the timing chain out and a new timing gear in. But because we're not doing that, we can skip that step and just pull the cam. So here's what I'm gonna do. We're gonna take these 10s, maybe, out of here. That's good. Now these are the same. I don't know if you guys noticed, but they're just a little shorter, but they're the same 10 millimeter. So keep them separate. Let's pull this timing gear off. And we're just gonna let the chain kind of fall down here. Once we get that out, then we can go on to the retainer plate. Now these we're not gonna keep, and I'll show you why here in a minute. So I'm gonna we're not gonna keep this retainer plate either, because this gasket right here, it's really flat and it wears out relatively quickly. So we're gonna go ahead and throw it aside because I got a new one, as well as the bolts, because they actually don't make this cam plate anymore, guys. And you'll see when we go to replace it, but the newer version, the newer GM version, has a recessed area here. And because of that, you have to use the recessed bolts and the new plate. So they discontinued this guy, and the chances of you finding a good one are next to none. All right, at this point, we need to go grab some dowels. And when I say that, what we're gonna do here is we're gonna roll this cam around. I probably should, I'm gonna go grab the water pump bolts. But we're gonna roll this cam around, and what we're doing here is we're gonna push those lifters back up in the cups. Now the really cool design here that GM did, now whether they did this on purpose or not, is you can slide 2 dowels right here in the engine, and that will, once you spin this around and hold the lifters up, that will keep them in place. Now, you can do what they call the Russian roulette method, where you spin it around, get the lifters up in the cups, and then you go ahead and pull the cam out. The risk that you take there, though, is those lifters fall down in the valley where the cam's at, and then you're pulling the heads. That's the only way to fix that, guys. You're just not gonna get them back in place. So I choose to use, there's a couple companies that make these tools that slide in here. I've always just used wooden dowels, and they work completely fine. There's no difference. Now, you know, when you're working in a vehicle, sometimes it's kind of cumbersome to get them in there, but they're no longer than the cam. So if you can get the cam out, you can get those dowels in. So let me go grab them, and we'll slide them in place. I'm gonna grab some water pump bolts because they're the same thread. Actually, these guys are the same thread too. I could use them. But I'll probably get the water pump ones. You hear that? Yeah, I wouldn't pull this cam. There is no way I'd pull this cam out without those rods in there. Let's take a look at what we got here. So I got a couple of the water pump bolts. And I really need to buy I've got several of the LS Specialty tools. They make a handle for the cam. I feel like I need one, as many as I do. I mean, this works, and it gives you something to hold on to. But, you know, it's not optimal. The one that has the handle comes out a little further. Now, you'd have trouble probably in a car, but if you're doing it like I'm doing it here, you know, it's not too bad. So what we're doing is these are 5/16 dowels, just wooden dowels, and we put them through just really carefully. And I like to roll this around as I'm doing it to make sure that cam or those lifters are staying where they're supposed to be. And it's gonna be snug, don't worry about it. Just take your time. And we should be all the way to the back. I cut these exactly in half. I thought I had my old ones laying around, but yeah, we're all the way to the back. 5/16. I like to use wooden ones. You can use metal, but you're gonna have to get a like a D-ring shape. This one went in way easier, didn't it? All right, we should be good, guys. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna pull this cam out. And you're trying to be careful not to nick the cam bearings, but it's kind of tough because you don't have a lot to hold on to here. Just take your time. And you kind of got to lift from the back here to push the back of the cam up. So we're good. See, we got the first section out. And on a 5.3, sometimes your bearings will be seized to the cam. And so if your cam doesn't want to come out, you're basically committed at that point to having them block, machined, and new cam bearings pressed in. Because it's pretty common for these 5.3s and the 4.8s to have an issue with that happening. All right. Well, old cam out, and it actually looks pretty good, guys. There's not a ton of wear on it. There's some on the bearings, but not bad at all. That's a good sign. So now that we got that one out, let's go grab the new one, and we'll kind of talk about, you know, what it is, what we're doing, and what our, you know, what our ultimate plan was when I originally bought this cam. Also going to grab some assembly lube, because since we're ready, we might as well go ahead and shove this new cam in. So let's go grab it. Okay, here's the new cam, and probably no surprise to some because I talked about it. It is an LS9 cam. And look, guys, I know I'm gonna hear, oh, it's not gonna make any torque, it's a waste of money. You know, that's fine. Look, this cam that's in it made no torque whatsoever. It wasn't built for this car, and neither is this. But the kind of what I wanted to do, and I'm kind of spoiling it here, but since I've got the truck for sale, chances are it probably isn't gonna happen. But I wanted an LS9 cam because it's quiet, okay? You can run single springs, it's quiet, it's not lopey, but it does give you some power on the top side. Now, you do lose quite a bit of torque on the bottom side, but my plan was to LSA this motor, okay? So put an LSA blower on the cathedral port heads with some adapters. And I don't know if you guys caught that in the video where I kind of walked around the shop talking about how I was overwhelmed, but the adapters, I actually have them. And I bought them off of, I don't even remember, I've had them for a while, but that was the ultimate goal. So I could make the torque up with the blower on the bottom end that I'm losing because I'm going to this cam, and then the cam will help it breathe better and actually make more power. But the LS9 cam is a pretty stout cam for the money that it costs, let's say that. It's just, to me, it's the best bang for the buck cam you have. Now, with that being said, you'll notice that there is no cam position sensor on the back of this cam. So to use this in this generation 5.3, we are gonna have to put the new cover on, because your how the cam registers, or the cam position sensor, is on the front valley cover, which is also on the cam gear, which you'll see as we go back together. But in order to do a LS9 cam in a 3rd gen 5.3, or even a 4th gen for that matter, if it doesn't have the timing gear, or it doesn't have the cam position sensor on the front timing cover, you're gonna have to swap to that. So there will be some wiring and stuff that I'll show you guys. I bought a plug and play harness. Obviously we got a new front cover, which you'll see here in a little bit. But yeah, that's why I went with what I went with. Specs on this cam, I don't even remember. It's like 207, 217. It's on like a 122 lobe separation, so it's not gonna be lopey. But because I have it out, I am going to spray it off with some brake clean, get it nice and clean. I'm gonna go over it a couple times just because a lot of times there'll be shavings and stuff left over from the grinding process. Now GM's a little bit better about that than your aftermarket cam companies as far as like getting stuff clean, but I still like to go over it, and then we'll get some assembly lube and we'll put this thing in. So after cleaning it off with some brake clean, we're gonna go ahead and put some assembly lube on it. Now I'm putting it on the lobes as well as where the cam bearings ride. And this is a mess, guys, so just know that you're gonna make a mess as you're doing this. Just no ifs, ands, or buts. And I use quite a bit of it. I always have to clean my jar off when I get finished because I just have an absolute mess. Now the cool thing about this is we can slide some in. So we'll go ahead and start it. And you're just gonna be just as careful going back in. And then as we get it in there, we can add more to the ones that follow, if that makes sense. And guys, I'll list all this stuff in the description that you need, or that I'm using anyway, as far as parts and like the assembly lube, and if you want to go with the 5.3 and a LS9 cam, you know, what parts are entailed. I'll list that all down in the description like I always do. Because I know one of the toughest thing is trying to, you know, source parts or read forums or trust somebody else. Sometimes you're kind of skeptical. We should be good to go all the way in at this point. And we are in. So I'm gonna go ahead, wipe my nasty hands off. Not like it's gonna do much good. And then we'll unscrew these guys. I don't even know if I'll be able to do it. My hands are so greasy. And then we'll go grab the timing gear. Now obviously once this is in, guys, we can go ahead, we can pull our dowels out also. So let's do that too. I'll actually save these. I only use them 1 or 2 times. That's probably why I threw the last ones away. Just because I don't use them that often. The other thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a razor blade. I'm gonna scrape off this gasket area that I was talking about right here for the cam retainer plate, just so we get a good, I probably should have done that before I put the cam in, but just to make sure that we seal up good there. Because if that's bad, or you reuse the old one, so a lot of people will reuse those, and if you do that, you risk not having any oil pressure, because if that leaks by that, your oil pressure will not be good. And I'm trusting that this is an aftermarket. It did have a ton of oil pressure, I will tell you guys that, even though it looks kind of, you know, carboned up or whatever. It did have quite a bit of oil pressure, so I'm gonna rock with this. But let's scrape that off, and then I guess we'll move on to that cam gear. My razor blade, you can see what I'm talking about here. Scrape that off really nice. I'm gonna follow that with some brake clean, and I'm using a microfiber instead of those shop towels there, because the shop towels seem to, when they hit a rough edge, they'll kind of shred up, and we don't want to drop anything in the motor. I'm actually going to scrape this entire area so we get a nice flat seal with our new cam retainer. These are the type things where, in my opinion, with the engine out, golly guys, it's so much easier. And I know it is quite a hassle to pull the engine out, all the stuff we had to remove, but this makes life so much easier. You can do this sitting down, not bending over the front of a truck or car or whatever you're working on. So I'm gonna call that good. Let's go grab the cam retainer, I guess, first instead of the gear, and get it in place. I'm a GM parts guy, only GM. This is what I'm talking about, that gasket, but you can see how these are recessed, and you have to buy the special bolts. So with that being said, I bought 4 GM bolts, and they do have some thread locker on them already, which is nice, so you don't have to worry about putting anything on there. Now, if you're reusing your old one, ARP does make new bolts for the old style. If you do come across one that's maybe in good shape or you want to reuse it or whatnot. Like I said, guys, it's too cheap to risk that. So I don't want to start this thing up, have no oil pressure or whatnot. In my opinion, for the, I don't even know, the bolts are pretty expensive. I want to say they're like $3 or a piece. But pretty cheap insurance. So once we get these in, we need to snug them down. And so generally how I do that, it's a T40 is what the size is. And I like to do it by hand so we can get this plate centered, because if you get too crazy here, you will snap that plate. There's not a lot to it, you'll crack it, and you don't want to do that. And then you're back to buying another one. So I just kind of alternate what I'm doing here. Put them in by hand. And that'll kind of help sink those down in those countersunk holes. And I want to say that the torque specs on this is 18, but I'm going to double check for you guys in my manual to make sure. You can see what I'm talking about. When you get to the end, just alternate. That way you're getting it nice and centered in those countersunk holes. And then we'll just snug it down with the ratchet for now. We're good. All right, let's go make sure our torque spec is right, and then we'll grab the cam gear. This is why you double check. It's actually 11. 18 is the old style. So we're gonna torque these down to 11, which is not much. You can see that they were already at that point for the most part. Just maybe a 1/16 of a turn. I'm gonna go back over them a couple more times. So 18 if you're using the old hex, 11 if you're using the new style, which, guys, you're not going to be able to find a plate in the old style because it is discontinued. I don't like that. Put an extension on it. Hitting the oil pump, and just don't want it to interfere with that torque. You can see I'm probably a little too picky. I go over it too many times probably. But now let's grab our new timing gear. is right here. And as I said, this is going to have a little spot on it where that cam position sensor is going to read. So you can see it's a little bit different. This guy right here, that cam position sensor is going to read. So let's see if we can get it on there. You obviously got to line up your dowel. And then there's a dot down here at the bottom. You see that right there? And there's a dot on the crankshaft. So we need to make these line up dot to dot. That's what we're looking for. While simultaneously getting the timing chain on. So I'm going to go grab my light. It looks like I'm pretty close on the dot. I don't know, we're gonna have to go grab an old crank bolt and roll this thing around to get the dot lined up straight up, and then I'll get the camera off the tripod with a light and show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. I got that crank bolt in, and I realized that I've still got my locking flywheel, my flywheel lock. So I'm gonna go ahead, so we don't get any spinning, I'm gonna go ahead and take this off. Should be 17 millimeter. We'll pop these out. We should be able to leave that in place and just pull this off. Now this is the one for the 4L60 or 4L80, sorry. You can see that spacer right there. So we're gonna obviously be reusing this, and I'm probably, since we're here, man, I don't know, that looks really, really good. I sure hate to mess with it, but it looks newer. It looks like they put a new, man, this is where we, look guys, you probably should replace this, and I probably will. I'm just gonna replace it. There's no sense in half doing this. I won't say what I normally say. But because, you know, we're here, it's easy access, we might as well replace this. This isn't terribly expensive. And look, this, a lot of times you get a leak back here, and there's no sense in having to pull this back apart, especially, you know, for the new owner. But anyway, now that we got this off, we should be able to go back to the front and get that turned. Now let's see if we can turn this and find that timing mark I'm looking for. Then, as I said, I'll bring the camera down here and show you exactly what I'm talking about. Guess I probably should be using a light. There's no way I didn't roll past it. There it is. Like, am I losing my mind, or is it not here? Okay, we need to back up just a hair. Hard to see because it's got some stuff on it. I think that's about where it needs to be. All right. So I'll see if I can pull the camera down here and show you guys this. Of course, I just dropped the chain. All right, so we'll get the chain back out of there, and then I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. I'm hoping I'm gonna be able to show you guys this, but right on the very top, I don't think I'm going to. Can you see that? Probably can't. There you can. All right, so that little gear has a little mark on it. There you can see it, if the camera focuses. So that needs to be pointing straight up. Sorry I banged my mic around on things, but we've got it pointing straight up. That tooth is pointing directly 90 degrees up. So now that we've got that where we want it, we need to grab our timing gear and we need to put it in place, and we need this piece right here. You see this? That gear needs to point straight towards that other dot. We need to go dot to dot is what we need to do. So let's get it on. I'm gonna set you back up on the tripod for that. All right, let's see if we can make this happen. This sometimes will take you a couple times, and so be patient. We need to kind of try to orient it where we're going together, it's kind of pointing down. May have to move it, like I said, a couple times. And we need to roll this cam around where we can get that little dowel that sticks out of the cam needs to go in this section right there. And we are off. Let's look how far. We're off quite a bit. Okay, so we need to, I'm gonna try to spin the cam over. And we're gonna move it a couple teeth the other direction. And now we are straight dot to dot. Got a little lucky there. Let's see if we could get one of these started. I think we're still off. I think when I got the bolt lined up, the cam moved. It did. All right, so we need to move it one more tooth over. We'll take these back out. This is what I'm talking about, guys. And so you can imagine leaning over the front of your truck and trying to do this. It would be absolutely excruciating. I mean, I've done it. Don't get me wrong, I've done it. Man, does it suck. Now, I know you're seeing me thread these in without any Loctite. These are actually the factory bolts. I'm going to be using some Loctite on them. I'm just getting things lined up. We'll make sure we're good. And then we'll pull them out one at a time to Loctite them. We are dot to dot. I'm gonna pull you off here again. Show you what I'm talking about. You can see the dot on the bottom of the cam, and hopefully you can see the dot down there. And we are lined up. But what I do like to do is I like to rotate the engine a couple times. So we just got that cam snugged up. And we're just making sure that when we come back around, the first time we come around, it should be, one should be at the very top. I need to tighten that up some more. When we come around one rotation, the cam, this dot should be up top when this bottom one reaches straight up and down again. And then after the second rotation, we should line up again. And that's what I'm making sure of. That tells you if you're off maybe a tooth or so. We are good. All right, guys. I'm gonna pull these out and then we'll put some Loctite on them, torque them down. A little bit of change of plans. When looking at the torque specs on those, the factory generally is 26, so like on a 5.3. But because we're using an LS3 timing gear and we're using an LS9 cam, I'd really like to torque it to those specs because, you know, that's generally how it would go. And they're saying 55. So what I've decided to do is we're gonna move on past this. We'll leave this here for now. I'm gonna order some ARP bolts and we'll go off their specs, just because I can order ARP cheaper than I can order the GM bolts. So at this point, let's, I think we're gonna lift the motor up and go ahead and get the oil pan off of it and keep moving along. Probably gonna make a huge mess here. But we need to get this oil pan off. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start back in the back with the very back ones. Should have a couple back here in the very back, the long ones. We're gonna take those out first. 10 millimeter. And the only reason, guys, I'm taking the oil pan off is obviously because we have a leak. But I'm also gonna take this opportunity, like I said, to take it to my local machine shop and have them clean it up so I don't have to spend hours out here cleaning it. We're gonna keep these bolts separate. They are the exact same, other than the long ones in the back. They're the exact same as the ones that you're gonna have on the front timing cover. And it may get interesting here when I get them all out. I'm hoping, I don't have any help out here, so I was hoping I can grab the pan. It's gonna make a mess, but I was hoping I could grab the pan maybe and it not fall. And I mean, I did drain the oil, but still. It should be heavy enough to pull itself down. It's just flinging oil everywhere because there's oil all over these. I'm gonna take some time off camera, guys, to clean this. And it should be loose. I think I got them all. Oh, I'm missing one. I thought that was kind of weird. Perfect. So it didn't fall. That's good. Need to snake it out. You can see the oil dripping off there. There's a bunch of gunk in the pan too, but as to be expected. The other thing we'll do is we'll check this screen right here on the bottom of this to make sure there's nothing in that area. Oh, this is going to be a mess. It's okay though. All right, now I think we'll go ahead and take off the, I don't know, we may leave the rear on for just a little bit longer. I'm gonna just go to the side here and clean up these bolts for the oil pan and kind of separate those. There's a couple things that I want to do on the pan before I take it out to him. So first off, I'm going to take this, obviously this closeout panel. I should have taken that off a long time ago, just a 10 millimeter here. Now we're going to clean that up and set it aside. I am going to take this off as well. This is like an oil block off. You guys saw this back in the, I think on the Turbo Trans Am here. I think I already did the video on it where I put this guy on. You had to drill and tap it, but we're going to take this off. I'm going to order a new gasket here. Aside from that, there was a 10 millimeter in this guy right here I took out and cleaned up. And then we need to take our oil level sensor out. And just because I think his tank gets pretty hot and we don't want to melt any of that stuff. The other thing is we're going to have to, this is the original pan, and we need to drill this rivet here, and there's another one over there in order to get the old gasket out of place. Now, you don't necessarily have to re-rivet the new one, but we do have to unrivet that in order to get the pan gasket out of place. To get this out, I generally use a big adjustable end wrench just because it's not generally too tight. And this just gives you the oil level in case you were to run low on oil. It's saying, hey dummy, put oil in it. So we'll clean this up. The gasket's stuck. See the gasket there? I may order a new one of those as well because that one looks pretty rough. And I'm sure that's relatively cheap. So we'll get that. Now let's go grab the drill, see if we can find a bit that will fit in order to get those rivets out. I'm using an 1/8 inch drill bit. Oh. Loose there. There should only be two. Almost. Well, I thought we had that one. It's spinning now. There we go. We got the old gasket off there. Woo, that's nasty. Set that there for now. So at this point, I guess we'll knock these two tins out. In fact, we could just do that now. There's one. Now I'm going to set this on my drain and let it all drain out, and we'll get it to our machine shop. Awesome, check out what came in, some ARP bolts. So what we're going to do is we're just going to thread these out one at a time. And ARP says to torque these to 25 foot-pounds. So that's what we're going to do. Of course, it says to put some of their assembly lube on there, which I already did, and just on the head, not on the threads, but on the inside of the head where it's going to tighten down. I can't believe that the stock LS3 ones would show 55 foot-pounds plus some additional. I feel like that's obsessive. Maybe not. But once we get these in, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, we'll torque them down, like I said, to 25. And then I'm going to go ahead and clean this surface off. And I think I may put the front cover on. I'm still waiting on the oil pan. I just dropped it off to the machine shop. And like I said, I did that because, oh my gosh, is it easier to have him clean it than it is for me. And I really need to free up my engine stand. But let's go get the torque wrench. We'll torque these down, and then we'll make a couple more passes on this, making sure our old gasket's cleaned off. We're gonna go ahead and go over this area here, just making sure we've got all the old gasket off. Now, to me, this is a good time to also go over the water pump gasket area. So this area here, making sure that you've got all the old gasket off. And I scraped quite a bit of it earlier, but we're gonna go over it again. And we may go over this a couple times. I got a brand new razor blade here. Still getting a little bit off the water pump area. And I like to clean this generally before I put the motor, put stuff together like this here. So that's why I went over it earlier. And then it doesn't hurt to go ahead and we'll get the bottom of the pan too, this corner. We're gonna have to get that before we put the pan on, but it doesn't hurt to get it now. So this process, we just go back and forth. I use some brake clean, clean the surface, scrape the surface, clean the surface, scrape the surface. I just keep going back and forth here. until what I think is clean. And then normally, I would use my alignment tool, because I'm going to go ahead and put the front cover on this. But my alignment tool only works, the one that I have right now, only works without the seal on the front of the timing cover. Well, I bought the timing cover as one piece, which you're going to see here in a minute. And because of that, I'm going to actually use the harmonic balancer as my guide to line up the front cover. Because you want a good alignment so you don't have any oil leaks or issues. So I'll go over this a couple more times and then we'll go grab that front cover and I'll show you what the difference is between it and why I bought it the way I did. So this method is a little more cumbersome. I'm going to take this out. And we're going to grab our new front cover here. Now, the way I'm going to list this in the description, guys, it comes with everything that you see here. So this is the newer style. And the reason why is, remember, we're running a cam where the pickup is on the front, on this guy right here. It's no longer going to be that cam position sensor. It's in the back. Your cam position sensor is now in the front cover. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start a couple of these bolts. And normally, as I said, I have a tool to align this. With the crank, but it has to have the seal out of the front. Well, obviously the seal's in this one. I'm not going to press it out to do that and then have to buy another seal. So the ways we're going to align this, and I actually confirmed this with my the guy I just dropped the pan off with, because he assembles LS motors all the time. I said, you know, which way do you prefer to put this stuff together? And he says he really likes to put the front and rear covers on and then the oil pan. So a couple things we're going to watch. I'm going to go ahead and put the old harmonic balancer back in place. And the reason I'm going to do that is this will give me, actually going to go grab my I've got an installer. But if I do it like this, then that will allow me to center this while I tighten this up. Now the other places that we're going to be watching for is making sure it's level here at the bottom where the oil pan will line up. So I'll grab a straight edge as well. And not only do we need to line it up there, but we need to make sure, because once you line it up with the center, it can still rock back and forth. So we want to make sure that it's flush at the bottom as well. So let me go get my balancer installer. We'll run this thing down a little bit. I don't want to take it all the way down. We just need to get it past that seal. So how this installer works is you thread it in the center and then you hold it while you tighten the center section. So that's what we're gonna do. Like I said, we're not gonna press this thing all the way on yet. We're just getting it far enough where it clears that and we can get good alignment. I need to order, I thought I had the other one, but apparently if I do, I don't know where it's at, which is unlike me. But I'm thinking maybe I just, in my mind, I thought I had it. I've got a lot of LS specific tools. And I don't know. Obviously I don't have it. Now we are gonna have to, you know, take this back off, because I could probably get it in the truck, but I'm not gonna try. I'm gonna take it back off. It's throwing me off because this isn't setting flush, so it looks like it's going in crooked, but it's not. Okay, now that we've got that where we want it, that's good enough. We can go ahead and unscrew this guy, well, I said. unscrew this and you'll see what I'm talking about when I pull this out. I think you guys have seen me use this before. Pretty handy for putting these on. See, it pulls it on as opposed to using the threads. So we thread it in and this pulls it on as opposed to trying to push it in with the old bolt. But we don't need a bolt in there. I am gonna go ahead and start to crank these down though. Until we get really, really close, we still have some movement. And then we'll worry about getting, you know, it lined up at the bottom here where it needs to be. And then we will torque these down. So you guys do need a straight edge on the bottom here. I think I'm going to go grab my impact to get these the rest of the way. And then we'll come back and I'll talk about the torque specs. Once we've got that, I put a straight edge on the bottom, we're all squared up. We need to torque these to 18 foot-pounds. So I like to alternate. So we'll go here and then here. And then down to the bottom over here. You don't have to do this. It doesn't say there's a sequence. This is the way I do it. The most important things are the alignment. Just so you don't have any oil leaks, and you know, that's the whole reason we pretty much tore this apart, was because of oil leaks. I'm going to check my alignment one more time. I've just got a straight edge that still good. Still good. All right, so we know that our alignment's good. I'm going to go over these one more time at 18. And then guys, I think I'll pull this off camera. I'm going to have to use my puller again just because we did push it in quite a ways. But then we're ready to go to the back, I believe. Now that we got that front one torqued, let's go to the back. So these are 10 millimeters. We'll take the old one off. And same situation here. You can buy just the seal, but I bought the whole cover because it's not a lot more money and it's worth it. And I probably don't need to change this because it didn't look like it was leaking. But guys, look, if you're gonna, holy cow, that's in there. You have to go get something to pry it loose. Oh, there we go. If you don't do this now, you're gonna regret it, I'm telling you. And I would say that that one is probably okay. But same thing here. I'm gonna take my razor blade. You can see the silicone here. And this isn't factory, so I'm assuming they had the entire pan off on this thing, from my guess, which is crazy that it would be leaking as bad as it was. You can see the back of our cam now. We got there, but let's take this opportunity to clean this all up. And same thing, like I said, razor blade. I'm gonna get the edges of the oil pan as well. That way there's less for me to scrape and I'm not running into a new gasket down below. But let's get this all cleaned up and then I'll show you the new one that I've got. Now that we got that all cleaned off, we have our new one here. It comes with the new gasket, all assembled, and you can see the alignment thing that it comes with as well. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start threading these in, just a little bit at a time. And you can see our alignment right here in the center. Now that thing's gonna pop out as we get tight. Or you can use an alignment tool, which I do actually have for this, but same situation. The one I have is for a, with no gasket in it. And then these were 10s to remove, but the replacement are 13s. So I'm gonna go grab a 13, and we're just gonna start snugging these down little by little, and then you'll see that this will push out. And then same situation down here at the bottom, in the fact that we're gonna want alignment where the oil pan's gonna go. So we need to get our straight edge and put back on the bottom here, making sure that as we snug this down and this thing pops out, that we're square in it, because it does have movement in it as well. So let me go grab a 13. So I got my piece of channel here, and it needs to come down just a hair on this side. That looks pretty good. So we're just going to start tightening these a little at a time. And as we draw it in, you're going to see this thing pop out. Now that we got these installed and everything's level, we can go ahead and torque these to 18 foot-pounds as well. And no sequence here either. I'm just alternating back and forth. Let's take these back off. Set them over to the side here. Now let's go grab, I cleaned up our push rods. I'm gonna run across them one more time just to make sure they're really clean. I'm just using some, I need to get some oil too. I'm gonna put some oil on the tips of them, but I'm gonna run across them a couple more times just to clean them up, and then we'll drop them back in place. These are the factory push rods, and I am going to be reusing those, but I do need to dab some oil on each end, and then we'll get them back in there. So as I said, I'm just gonna run across them one more time, and I've got some oil here. Doesn't hurt to blow through them also, just to make sure there's nothing stuck inside of them. You can also use some assembly lube if you wanted to. I just always use some oil. And then the cool thing about taking the stands out all at once is you can just, I'm gonna run some cleaner over them as well, just some brake clean, just to make sure there's no like cobwebs or sticks or whatever. And then we'll set them back in place. All right, let's go grab the rocker arms. Now I'm going to start these by hand. And there's mixed thoughts on this, whether you use any kind of sealant or Loctite. I don't remember the last time if I used Loctite or not. I like to get these started because you don't want to cross thread them before I hit them with that little impact. So let's go over them here. Make sure your valves lined up and your push rods lined up. Now we can come back and torque them. So we need to torque these to 22 foot-pounds. And so there's a method of thought that says you need to tighten them down when they're the valve's opening, or the valve's closing or it's on the actual center lobe of the cam. Honestly, guys, I've never done that. I mean, I've done it before, but it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of people that don't do that. So I'm not gonna worry about that, to be real honest with you. I'm just gonna tighten to 22. I'm gonna roll the motor around by hand. I'm gonna put the crank bolt back in. And once we do that, then we will go run them one more time. And you see how that moved? That makes me a little bit nutty, because I want it directly on top of the valve. But either way, that's what I'm gonna do. We're gonna torque these to 22, and then we'll follow it up with turning the crank, and then we'll tighten them to 22 again. Here's what I've done. 22 foot-pounds, turn the motor over a couple times, 22 again, turn the motor over one more time, 22 one more time. On both sides. I've actually got both sides in now. So at this point, I'm gonna take some cleaner, and probably not gonna have to use a razor blade here. You may have to, but get this old gasket material off, and then by that time, I'm hoping the UPS man shows up with the new gaskets for this, so we can get it all buttoned up. And then I think I'll have my oil pan as well. So then we'll move on to the oil pan, and then guys, we can start putting the harness back on this thing. It's getting exciting. So we got the oil pan back, and take a look at how much nicer that thing looks. But we're ready to put it on. And I've got a new gasket here, new oil pan gasket, which I'll list in the description down below. We've got all the bolts over here cleaned up that you can see on that towel. And so what I did was, I just did the same method, guys. Took a razor blade and went over the whole surface here. And the reason I'm putting it together like this, so a couple things we need to do. The other thing is I did spray some cleaner here, make sure there's no junk in this, you know, that would clog up the actual pickup tube. So make sure that you do that since you have it apart. But at this point, we need to put silicone in these areas right here. You see this crack in between the block and the actual rear cover? So I'm gonna put silicone here, there, same thing in the front. So we're gonna put some silicone there. And then I generally don't use the rivets to hold the new gasket in place. So what I will do is I'll thread all the bolts in for the most part, and then we'll get this thing set up into place. But before I put it up there, I'll show you guys where I have the silicone. That way you can see, you know, kind of what I'm talking about. And it's not necessarily gonna leak, but believe me, guys, if you're here, go ahead and run just a small bead of silicone there. If it oozes out the side, you can wipe it off afterwards. But it's just a good idea since you have it apart. But getting a little closer. I wanted to show you guys, you see that bead of silicone right there? Just a small little bead in all four corners. At this point, though, let's get our pan over here and our new gasket, and I'm gonna wipe the pan surface off one more time just to make sure we're nice and clean. It's just been setting overnight, but we'll get it set up here. We'll start threading some bolts in, and then we'll try to get it in place. So as I said, I'm just gonna make one more pass on this just to make sure that we're clean. Looks pretty good, but and then we'll set this guy in place. It only goes in one way, you can see. And then like I said, I generally don't use the rivets just because, I don't know, it's something you have to knock out later. We're gonna grab some bolts here. We're just gonna start threading through because the gasket will grab them, and so they'll hang in place, which makes it kind of nice. So we'll get all these threaded in, which will hold our gasket where it needs to be. And then once we do that, we need to go get our straight edge again, because we need to make sure that the back of the pan sets flush on the block, because if you don't, now on this it doesn't matter as much because it's a 4L80 and it doesn't have that closeout plate at the bottom, but normally your transmission bolts to the bottom of the oil pan. So if that, you know, it's still a good idea to make sure that it's square. But while you're bolting it to the transmission, if you're off, it will crack that pan. So we need to make sure that we get it as square as possible. But let me get these bolts in, and then we'll move over to putting it on the actual block. Now it's time. We got all the bolts in place. Need to kind of thread this in. And you can see that I've threaded them up quite a ways. And this really should have 2 people, just because I don't want to smash into that material, those beads of silicone, until I'm close to, you know, mating it up. So we'll get a couple started. And then we'll just kind of work our way around here. This is where it is kind of nice to have it on a swivel, because I can swivel it around, get these bolts started. I'm just trying to go as square as possible just because of that silicone. I think I've got enough started. We're going to go around and make sure they're all started. Still yet to touch our silicone, which is good. I was afraid of being one person out here. We may screw that up. But I'm just gonna work my way around here, guys. And then when I get to the back, as I said, we're gonna square this up with the back of the block here to make sure that everything's good. And then we'll come back here in a second. We'll talk about torque specs. Now that we got this thing on, we need to torque it down to 18 foot-pounds on all the 10 millimeter, and then these long ones that are here in the back. So these guys, these are 106 inch-pounds. And if you put 18 on them, you're probably gonna snap them, so don't do that. But let's get this thing torqued down. One other thing while I'm torquing these, there is no sequence. So you can go, I generally start in the middle and work my way out. So I'll go this side, other side, and so on and so forth. But there is no actual sequence to do this. I'll generally leave the 106s till last, the 106 inch-pounds. But the rest of them, just go like side, side, and kind of step your way back like you try to bolt down a head, but there is no real sequence.